We're fixing to look at how that occurred. Which, if you've looked in your course outline, you see we spent 3 class periods on chapter 19. One of those is going to involve, I don't know if we can really call it a documentary, but has anybody seen The Men Who Built America on the History Channel? No? It was so good. It was fun. It's a mini-part mini-series. But, long story short, we're going to, one of those 3 class periods, we're going to be watching a video on the king of the railroad, a man by the name of Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was one of the most iconic industrial frontiersmen this country's ever seen. He builds Grand Central Station. He is absolutely dominates the railroad industry and is very much, in fact, king of the railroads, as we will see. But I think I'm going to save him for last in the space of time. So long story short, this week we're going to hit our lecture series, and then we'll conclude the lecture series next Tuesday with a really cool, it keeps your focus, it's actually really good, I promise, video on him. But, long story short, as the days of the Old West are coming to an end in the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution also begins in the late 1800s, after the end of the Civil War. You see the birth of it, because by 1900, we're the #1 economic superpower on the globe, right? It's going to take us several decades to get there. And for us, we're fixing to see how and why the evolution and the transformation occurred. But there will be 3 big industries who will literally pave the yellow brick road, who will pave the way for every other industry to follow, that led us to being able to be the #1 economic superpower by 1900. So the first 3 businesses, the ones that paved the way for all others, every single business idea to follow, are oil, steel, and the railroad. And we're hitting some pretty fun stories today. On 2 of the 3, again, we're going to wait for Cornelius Vanderbilt till next week. But of the big 3, oil, steel, and the railroad, which of the big 3 was the first? The first to set the standards, the first ever technically large corporation in this country? Yeah, wait. It's right there. The railroad, right? Railroad came before the other 2. Railroad sets the precedent. Railroad is a wonderful test question. The railroad is the first ever large, big business, #large corporation, to ever be established in this country, with the other 2 quickly following. And the 3 of them actually all tie together. But that is not who we're talking about today. This is an excellent test question. I'll make sure y'all get it. The stories we're going to start with today are on the other 2. Steel and oil. 2 incredibly impressive individuals, a man by the name of Andrew Carnegie and a man by the name of John D. Rockefeller. Senior, per se. Now, I'm going to skip some slides in space of time because we're hitting the railroad next week. But while these 3 businesses set the precedent, set the way for all of the businesses to follow, while these 3 are just charging through the country and forming paths and setting us down that road, on the flip side, there are a ton of other businesses that are getting their starts, per se, who are being born and getting the ideas for businesses to come. They're being patented in the late 1800s. By 1890, these have all been patented, and they're businesses that they're getting their start. And if I say patented, what does that mean? What's a patent?
You have the rights.
Bingo. Let's just say I come out with this invention for a soda. Best whenever, by the way. It's not the same. Good. Okay. But I'm telling you about, I have my own concoction. I have this flavor I invented, and this brand new soda on the scene I've invented, and I tell you about my recipe for it, and you taste it for yourself. And I'm going to launch this product in the next few weeks. And you've tasted it. You know how good it is. You know this is like a billion, if not $1 trillion idea down the road. You take my invention. You take my idea. You take what I've told you in confidence. You go out there and you legally buy the rights to my idea. You put my invention out. You're the one that makes all the money. of my idea. If you come up with any type of concept, any type of business notion, it's so important to make sure you legally own the rights to it. Because if you come out, this thing, do you know how much money, by the way, this business has made this year? Throwing that out there. If you legally own the rights to it, you're the one who inherits the profit from it. So it is so important to make sure to legally own the rights to a concept of a product or an invention that's fixing to come out, so that you profit from your idea. So all of these people had patented the ideas to these businesses, these ideas, and all of them were being born by 1890. George Eastman had patented his idea for the Kodak camera. Now, this will the camera, it was the first ever camera ever in this country. It'll revolutionize and make possible so many different avenues and ventures in this country. Today, 130 years later, we all use our phones for the most part, right? Unless you're into photography and you've got a really nice camera and you like to take physical, actual cameras on negatives, most of us just use our phones, right? Which, if you can see that, that'd be pretty damn cool. But still, you want to buy a disposable camera. You don't get your phone away. You're going floating down the river. Or for whatever reason, you buy a disposable camera. 99.9% of the time, what brand is that disposable camera? Going to a Walgreens, going to a CVS. I'll give you a hint. It's Kodak. Y'all must not buy disposable cameras.
No.
That's okay. I don't usually either at the same age. But yeah, so Kodak is still around, long story short. If you go and buy a disposable camera, Walgreens, CVS, it's still Kodak. So the brand and the corporation is still around, but times have changed. We took his idea and we just absolutely exploded it into a whole new industry, right? Isaac Singer is patenting his idea for the sewing machine. You don't think that's going to be important moving into the 19th century? I'm pretty sure those are still used today, right? Alexander Graham Bell patented his idea for the first ever telephone in this country. Now keep in mind, over in Europe, things as measured, the ideas have been patented over in Europe. This is American history. So he's the first one in this country to come up with the idea for a telephone. In fact, he's the first person to ever make a telephone call. And guess what the very first ever telephone number in this country was? 1. John Little put the little one in there, spin it around. That was the first phone number ever in history. Now it's the beginning of an area code, right? Times have changed. But think about Alexander Graham Bell, the first ever telephone in the history of the United States. What do you think his brain would do if he could see one of these things? Explode, baby, right? Just saying. Which the phones themselves, in the last, 20 to 25 years have absolutely imploded on the scene. And I think all of you are probably too young, but I know reruns occur all the time. Who has seen Saved by the Bell? Thank you. One person has seen Saved by the Bell? Y'all, that's just sad. You know what? It's a great freaking show. The old people days of the 1900s. Just saying. Came out in the 1900s. Actually, a student last semester who flipped out when we were talking about, this is still a topic, I don't care, it's kind of funny. They were talking about One Direction and something else, and they were like, did you listen to boy bands and stuff when you were, our age too? And I'm like, oh yeah, back in that day and age. They're like, what'd you listen to? I'm like, well, I was a big NSYNC girl. Her exact words. Oh my God. Were they from the 1900s? Well, yeah, but they didn't come out during World War II. I'm just saying. I'm not that old. No, not funny at all. Right. I thought it was funny. I was like, yeah, oh yeah, I'm from the 1900s, I'm old. But in here, if you've seen Saved by the Bell from the 1900s, Zach pulls out his cell phone. And his cell phone is easily this big, if not bigger, and it's thick. And then he's got to pull out the antenna to talk on it. It looks like a space machine. But that was cell phones in not that long ago, 20, 30 years ago. And in 20, 30 years, we've gone from something like this to this bad boy, right? times have changed, but it all occurs because of this video right here. And Thomas Edison obviously produces the light bulb, patented his idea for the light bulb, but there's a whole lot more than that. That's what he's known for. In 1902 and 1903, the first ever movie will be filmed on the scene, The Great Train Robbery. It is exactly 4 minutes long. 1904, Jack and the Beanstalk comes out, the second movie ever in history. But they were shot on his invention. Did you know Thomas Edison created the motion picture camera? Everything movies will be filmed on for the test of time. Again, well, we got 3D, 4D, we got all these special effects, we got Jurassic Park, right? How cool would that be? We wouldn't have it if he hadn't come up with the idea. So, these are the ones I'm skipping, by the way, because we're hitting these on Tuesday. Oh, I want to go here. No, I want to go here. Okay. That's what I'm going to skip. So all these inventions are, being born. All these inventions that are going to lead us, down the path and help us become the #1 industrial country in the world. But they're following the path set by the big three: the railroad, oil, and steel. Steel in itself is a pretty dang impressive story. We have metal, guys. We have railroad trains. We're building things. We do have metal. We're at our disposal. But the type of metal that's being produced, that is affordably produced before this point, before Andrew Carnegie, bends and twists and snaps. It can be seen as soft. There is not a bridge in this country because it'll collapse with the weight of like a train. There are no tunnels. There are no multiple-story buildings because with weight, it couldn't handle the weight in this day and age. So, all railroad tracks were made out of metal, and railroad trains derailed all the time because the rails would bend and twist and snap and dent, etc., etc. And we did have steel. Steel was a thing, but it was so expensive to make before this point that the largest thing being created by steel was a fork. He is going to change that. He is going to revolutionize that. And the same concoction that he will create in the 1800s is basically about 98% still pure, the same concoction today. It's what we use to build everything. Bridges, overpasses, tunnels, skyscrapers, the Twin Towers, I know, uncomfortable, touch you so day. The steel that unfortunately was impacted was his steel. Again, how many stories were there in the Twin Trade Towers? Over 100, right? Used Carnegie steel to make the Twin Trade Towers. So what he creates and what he's going to fix him to do that revolutionizes his country is all his own concepts, all his own baby. And his story alone is impressive because he's an immigrant. Not only is he an immigrant, he is a poor immigrant. He is from Scotland. Very simple, very humble beginnings in life. His mother is a hand loom weaver. His father is a carpentry, poverty-ridden. Just scraping the bottom of the barrel of survival. And if you're already struggling, to make it day in and day out, and economic depression happens in your country, fight or flight's going to kick in, right? You've don't have a chance in hell of surviving in your own country considering the situation, but there is this country called America that is becoming known as the land of opportunity. And for survival of your family, he is a prime example of an immigrant who came over, he and his family came over to the United States with pennies to nickels in their pockets, with the clothes on their back. They had lost everything, and they're starting over from scratch with nothing. And this is in the days, which we'll talk about in the lecture on Thursday. This is the days of the Industrial Revolution, the industrial world, where child labor was a huge thing. Child labor in the industrial age was insane. Millions and millions of children at the time of 6 years old toiling away in factory life. It's gonna be bad. It's actually it's a very heavy and serious topic. So they come over, clothes on their back, nothing to their name. And obviously, but again, here they have opportunity. Here there are options. And it's what, again, Andrew Carnegie is a prime example of child labor. Pulled out of school and at 12 years old to help make ends meet, he finds himself working on a cotton factory for a whole $1.20 a week. Y'all hold your excitement. $1.20 a week. But even as a young kid who's come to this country, knows nothing about it, toiling away, he is wise enough to know this is a land of opportunity. There's got to be more to this life. There's got to be other avenues. There's got to be options. And he wants more. He wants more. This can't just be his life. He wants to make something of himself. So at 14 years old, freshman in high school age, he's going to get himself, he's going to look for other work, other job. He doesn't want to just be a farm or a cotton worker his whole life. So he gets a job as a messenger boy for the Pittsburgh Telegraph Office, delivering messages to all these different businesses, including the railroad. And as there is a man that works for the railroad by the name of Tom Scott, who kind of takes an interest in him, takes him under his wing, becomes his mentor per se, and he tells him, as his mentor, says, look, if you want to make it in this country, you at least need some decent level of education. Again, it continues mentoring, but obviously, and Tom Scott actually even gives him money to go back to school, to start. So he works, he works through the day, and at night he starts to take night classes and things like accounting and science and English, talking and speaking correctly, speaking eloquently, being able to write eloquently. And the more education he gets, the more experience he gets under his belt. At about 18 years old, 16. At 16 years old, 18, I was looking at the 18. At 16 years old, but at 1853, long story short, he moves up again. He goes to work at the railroad company where Tom Scott is partial owner, the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. And he goes to work as secretary and telegraph operator. Now he's making $4 a week. I know, y'all continue your excitement there. But he's growing, he's expanding, he's climbing the rungs of the ladder the best he can. But now he's in this industry. He works the railroad, so he can see and he deals daily with his own eyes the problems the railroad has in terms of metal. He's in the world and is daily witnessing to the issues the railroad has due to the metal of the industry, right? The railroad tracks, the bending, the derailing, the snapping of railroad ties, the derailing of trains, faulty equipment, etc., etc. And as he's in this world, and it's just over and over and over, almost on this daily basis, it's all in this world, there's problems. His head, like it's been since he was 12 years old, says there's got to be something better. There's got to be a solution to this, right? There's got to be answers here. This can't be all there is. This can't be the best it's going to be. There's got to be another avenue here. So, again, along with Tom Scott, for the moment, he comes up with an idea. Again, we do have steel. Steel / pig iron is the strongest, toughest metal in the world. But again, we can only make a fork. He's like, there's got to be an answer to this. There's got to be reasoning to this. There's got to be a solution to this. So, by 1870, he is going to open up his own business. He's going to completely move into steel production. And again, not just with his money, because they don't have bumpkins to their name per se, right? They're surviving, but they're not wealthy. He's making $4 a week, right? You get investors. You convince people that your business, your concept, what you want to create, is going to make money. And you get investors on board, which he does. And he creates his business with the goal of making steel affordable and available to the world. Now this middle one comes straight from your book. I know it's big and long. You do not have to write the whole thing down because guess what? It's in your book. But yeah, I did highlight this right here because this becomes the key principle of all business success, right? Reduce production. Now he figured out he needs to reduce his production costs to the lowest level possible. Per se. And again, using his investors' money, not his own, per se. But one of the key raw natural elements found in steel is coal. Instead of buying coal from an already established coal mine out west, it's a huge industry, he buys a coal mine. Yeah, a lot of money up front per se, but all the coal that is brought up and harvested from this mine is theirs, right? There's no middleman. There's no extra cost associated with it. There's no racked up price. It's as cheap as you can get. They're gonna have to use the railroad almost on a daily basis for their business. Instead of paying to use a railroad every day, he buys partial ownership in the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. Yeah, it's a lot of money up front. But anytime he needs to use a railroad as a partial owner, it's free. He hires scientists, he hires chemists, he hires accounting managers, executives, the best and brightest minds. They can concoct figure out how to create steel at an affordable rate, but also run his business well. He just does everything right. And he comes up with, he comes up with a cousin to the steel that we had, the real expensive one. He comes up with a cousin that's just as strong, long story short. Just as strong, just as durable, still what we use today, right? He's done it. He's created a product that will absolutely revolutionize this country in every way, shape, or form. But production's half the story. Actually, it's a third of the story. Another third of the story is consumption, convincing people to buy it. How are you going to prove? You can say that you have the best products in the entire world. Back up what you preach. You can't prove it. Why are people going to believe you? He's got to find a way to prove the quality of what he's just made. Again, there are no bridges in this country because every single one has collapsed due to weight. Well, he is going to prove his product, how good his product is, by building a bridge over the most populated and most important river in this country, the Mississippi River. And when it's proven that his bridge can stand the test of time and any weight, that's all right. People will be on board, and his company will take off. But we have a video clip we're going to watch. Kind of shows, because again, people are scared. People are scared to death to cross this bridge. He's going to spend years building it, as we're fixing to see. We're going to come in on this video and the production of the bridge. He gets it. No one's seen a structure like this before, ever. It's stunning. But people are scared to death to use it because every single bridge throughout history has collapsed, right? So not only will he build this bridge, now he's also going to have to get really creative and find a way to get people to be willing to test it. He's so smart. This is just interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. But here comes our video clip, picking up what that just thought.
The birth of modern America is well underway. Trains now touch all four corners of the continent. Homes across the nation are lit at night. And the country's most ambitious construction project is in progress on the banks of the Mississippi River. Led by Andrew Carnegie. Carnegie has insisted on building his bridge out of steel, an unproven material, with huge costs. Construction is drastically behind schedule and dangerously over budget. Carnegie is under mounting pressure.
The difference between people who succeed and people who fail, I think, in many cases, is not fear. Everyone experiences fear. The difference is what you do with your fear. Do you work to overcome it, or do you let it defeat you? And I think that is actually what distinguishes very successful people from others.
Desperate, Carnegie reaches out to investors, looking for an infusion of cash.
You'll be glad to learn that the building of St. Louis Bridge is progressing smoothly. I am convinced that steel is the future. However, obtaining such a large quantity of steel is proving to be difficult, causing us some delays. It is also proving to be extremely expensive. My forecast shows that we will require another $1 million before the year is out. But I have no doubt that in time the people will come to see the bridge as the eighth wonder of the world. Yours sincerely, Andrew Carnegie.
Lee's last minute pitch works. He secures the financing he needs. And finally, after 4 years, the bridge is complete. The results are epic. But Carnegie now faces a new problem.
In St. Louis, one of the real problems was convincing people that the bridge wasn't going to fall. I mean, nobody had ever seen bridges like this anywhere.
Carnegie sees all the possible uses for steel. But before he can realize the material's potential, he needs to convince the public of its strength. And he has a plan to do just that. A popular superstition at the time holds that an elephant won't cross an unstable structure.
The day the bridge opens, Carnegie, who is a master publicist, sets up a parade across the bridge that's led by an elephant.
It's an incredible gamble, but Carnegie hopes if the elephant crosses, the people will follow.
As the people of St. Louis look at this bridge, they see that it can sustain whatever weight's going to be put on it.
When the stunt succeeds, Carnegie gets more requests for his steel than he can possibly handle. And his biggest customer is an industry he knows well.
It was pretty cool. It was pretty innovative, per se. And someone yesterday cracked me up. They were like, well, yeah, but how much does an elephant weigh? It's not. It had nothing to do with the weight of the elephant crossing the bridge. They absolutely believed that elephants had sensed whether something, a structure of that magnitude, was safe or not. I mean, horses do the same thing. And if they didn't think it was safe, you couldn't get them to cross it. I mean, they would freaking trample you backwards and not cross it if they had intuition that, instinct told them it wasn't safe. If an elephant crossed it, it was believed that it was, obviously it was a safe structure. And hopefully it sounds cool. Hopefully it's not, people are like, that's kind of funny. But it's a true story, and that's all it took. Next thing you know, Carnegie can't not get enough steel produced to meet all the orders that are coming in. Everybody wants to buy his product and his product alone, which in turn will start putting every other metal industry, factory, business out of business, right? If everyone's only willing to buy from Carnegie, every metal business industry that's been around up to this point is going bankrupt. And that was not Carnegie's intention. He was not looking to ruin his competitors. He wasn't looking to ruin anybody's livelihood. He just wanted to fix the problem and create this product and that would lead us in this whole new direction. And it turns out this is going to be a win-win for everybody, because as many orders as he's getting, he can't fill his orders with the factories that he has. So long story short, companies that he is unintentionally putting out of business, he will buy. And just go with me, these numbers are random. But let's say companies were $10. Well, he'll buy it for 15. He will take care of his competitors. He will take care of those who puts out of business. Make sure that they're, all right. And everyone in those factories has a job now with him. He says, you worked for Putnam Metal. Go with it. Now you have a job. If you want it, you have a job with Carnegie Steel. Nobody will lose their jobs. Their jobs will just change. And so he will buy out the factory owners. Everyone will still have a job. They'll not work for Carnegie Steel. And it's a win-win, because now he has another factory he can add on to his industry to produce more steel, right? So he's doing everything the right way. Doing everything the right way. And again, Carnegie Steel will not only explode, but not only in the United States. Carnegie Steel will become an international phenomenon. Do I have it on my next slide? Yes, I do. 19 years after founding his company, Carnegie Steel is producing, selling, manufacturing more steel than the entire country. His steel, he is selling, producing more steel than England. The entire country combined. Hashtag holy crap. I call that success, right? And by 1900, this little immigrant, this little Scottish immigrant with pennies and nickels in his pocket, came over to North America with his family, making $1.20 a week. Now has a company that is worth $1.4 billion in 1901. How much do you think that is today? Throw that out there. Just saying. And actually, we looked it up last semester. Oh, do I still have the picture on my phone? It was a huge number. Or I can still calculate it. Yes, in 1901. $1.4 How about 36,986,219,115,644.39. That ain't bad, right? But he's got a company worth trillions of dollars, $1.4 billion in 1901. But then when he's ready to retire, he's created this superior company that he's way, way, way more worried about the future of it and someone taking it over and controlling it correctly and it continuing and it being established, becoming, a permanent face of this country. And the person to do that, the person to hand out, he feels confident in handing the reins over to, is another huge industrial founding father per se, J.P. Morgan. And he decides that he feels safe, he feels secure, and giving it. He's going to sell his company to J.P. Morgan, but he's only going to sell it for $500,000, literally a third of what it's worth. Good Lord, you get $1.4 billion and you sell it for a third? Why? Why would you do that? Why would y'all do that? What is your thought process behind that?
I guess he wanted his company to last forever.
He did. He absolutely did. And that was a big part of it. Huge part of it. On top of that, guys, he has more than enough. Before this transaction, before this avenue, he would log on to, WellsFargo.com. He log on to Chase.com. And in his personal checking account, / savings account, he had a personal fortune of $225 million in 1900. Now he's got $750 million. He's got enough. He has more than enough. And considering his upbringing, where he was from, his livelihood, he's got more than enough that he could use, and his children, and children's children could use. He's got more enough to live whatever life he wants to, and enough to give back, because he was also very, very much about giving back. You don't write the Carnegie Institutes down, but these are just examples of some of the things that he did. For the rest of his life, once he retired, he's got $750 million in his checking account after the transaction. He will put, but by the time he passes away, he's put $350 million back into this country. Because it's not, he didn't make himself rich. This country buying his product made him rich, right? So he'll build libraries, 3,000. He'll build and open 3,000 libraries across this country. Again, you don't have to write these down; they're just examples. But he builds Carnegie Hall. He builds the Institute of Pittsburgh Technology in Washington, which are all now private universities. And he just gives. His whole mentality is give back to those who made you what you were. Give back to those who've given to you. He says, put all your eggs in one basket, and then watch that basket. What happens? Nothing, right? They sit there. Do something with it. Now, is he perfect? Hell no. As we will see on Thursday. This is all on the CEO magnum scale of the story. But he is not perfect. He makes some major mistakes along the way for sure. One of his big major mistakes that he makes is in terms of taking care of his workers. Productions have this, they're the story. If you don't have anybody to produce and make your product, you're sunk, right? They're the backbone of your company. Well, he does not take care of his workers. They are not treated well. They will go on strike. There's lots of strikes. There's lots of death. There's lots of imprisonment. He forgets about the little people, as we will see. Foreshadowing. So he's not perfect, but my God, the mistakes he makes, look at what he did. So take it with a grain of salt. But his steel is still used today for everything. And it's going to absolutely be able to transform this country and open every new door you can possibly think of. He's just impressive. The other one of the big three is oil. There's our other individual we're talking about today, good old Rockefeller. Now he's an interesting story too. Much different. I'll take that back. In beginnings, you could say similar to Carnegie in terms of a hard lifestyle, hard beginnings. He's driven like Carnegie, but he's greedy. He is maliciously ambitious. And he will set out, Carnegie wants to create a product. Carnegie wants to set the pace to change the world. Rockefeller sets the pace to want to get rich, to be greedy. And Carnegie ends up putting all of his competitors out of business. He takes care of them. Rockefeller sets out to ruin all of his other businesses on purpose. His is a different story. He will become the most hated man in this country. And he will feel like he is on this untouchable pedestal. But then, he will fall from grace. He will fall from grace. He will hit rock bottom. And when he hits rock bottom, it's like he wakes up for the first time in decades. And while he becomes the most hated man in America, he will die one of the most beloved in America. Interesting. Again, he's an interesting story all in his own right. But long story short, he's an immigrant, obviously. He's born in this country, born in New York. Very humble, poor beginnings, though. Very hard beginnings. His father was a con man. His father was a traveling con man, was never home. Rockefeller, literally to make money for the family, considering his father was never around, would do things like sell candy for, to kids at school. But the little bit of money he would make, his father would come home, take it, and leave again. So very, very poverty-ridden beginnings, hard beginnings, per se. But he's still ambitious. He's very ambitious. He doesn't want to feel like Carnegie. He doesn't want to struggle his whole life. He doesn't want to go down that road. There's got to be other avenues. There's got to be answers, right? And he's very motivated. He does get educated. He receives an education. And he's ambitious. In fact, as a young man, he's got two big goals in his life. He wants to live to 100 years old, and he wants to make $100,000. Both absolutely admirable in the early 1800s. He falls just short of one. He way outseeds the other. That's right. He lived to 130 years old. No. He's 97, 96, 97, 98. I mean, I have to go back to actually give you the number, but just short. He was over 95. He was either 96, 97, or 98. Just fell short of the 100-year mark. Became a billionaire. So, but again, and this is part of it too. You know, when he becomes a young man, he gets married. He's a Quaker, by the way. Doesn't drink. Very religious. Gets married. Starts to have children. Well, oil is discovered. Black gold. This is in the day and age where black gold explodes, pun intended, across this country, right? So he opens up his own business, his own small refinery business, the Clark and Rockefeller Produce and Commission Company, with a partner. But again, it's small. He's on his own. He's struggling. He's struggle busing, barely making ends meet. As a young businessman, not really setting the precedent. No success story. But then, kind of like Carnegie had someone take him under his wing with Tom Scott, Rockefeller will have someone take him under his wing too. A man that we'll talk about later on by the name of Cornelius Vanderbilt, who by this point is the untouchable king of the railroad. And the two men, Rockefeller is the lucky one selected. Hardworking. Vanderbilt's not just going to draw names out of a hat. Vanderbilt sees the possibility with Rockefeller. Decides to mentor him, decides to see if he wants to go into business together, form a little partnership. And with Vanderbilt behind him, Rockefeller will sell his small refinery business and form a new one. Along with another partner by the name of Samuel Adams, and no, not the bear, and no, not the founding father, it's a very popular name. He will form Standard Oil. Another refinery business, because, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars to be made in gold, and black gold / oil. But is the gold that is taken right out of the ground, which you put in your cars, in your lanterns, in your machinery? No, it has to be refined. It has to be refined and turned into kerosene, gasoline. So refinery, unless you're out there being a wildcatter and you have, wet gold right to the surface of your dirt on your ranch, the true money for a businessman is in refining oil. So that is when he creates Standard Oil with the help of Rockefeller. But this is where the darkness of Rockefeller comes to be, and the evilness and the maliciousness, because he wants it all. He wants to be the only oil refinery in the country, and he sets out to be. And again, with the help of Vanderbilt, he will be. Literally, they come up with a whole scenario. They come up with a whole evil agenda to put, on purpose, every other business, oil refinery business across the country, out of business. First day, he and Vanderbilt go, because Vanderbilt controls, by the way, 60% of the railroad across the entire country at this point. Well, he and Vanderbilt go into this sneaky deal where Rockefeller will be the only oil refinery allowed to use the railroad. If you can't ship your product anywhere, or if you can't have things like barrels brought in to put your oil in, how do you even function? He's the only one who can use the railroad. All the oil barrels across the country, Rockefeller will buy, so no other oil refinery has oil barrels to put their oil in. They even come up with a secret language, their own secret decoded language, to which they can communicate with each other through the newspapers, so that no one else can know what they were talking about, and they could communicate with all these new plans and avenues of how they were going to put people out of business. And they do. One by one, Rockefeller puts every other oil refinery out. And if theirs are worth, again, go with it. It's $10. Well, Carnegie can buy them out for $15, right? He'll buy them out for $5. He doesn't give a damn. He doesn't give a damn who he hurts. He just wants it all. And that's the only thing that's important to him. It's sad. And it works, though. He becomes the monopolizing controller of the entire industry. He's making millions upon millions, if not billions of dollars. And it's all his. But unlike Carnegie, this is not going over well, shockingly. And he has become the most hated man in this country. I mean, there's all these caricatures and pictures, of him on, his face on the body of an anaconda, right? It's just swallowing up, people in this country. And people just detest him. He's the most hated. I mean, he's talked about in newspapers. He's talked about at dinner tables. He is the most detested in his country. He doesn't give a damn. Does not give a damn. I mean, people like Teddy Roosevelt, because it comes to the point that, A, what he's done is wrong, but there's also the question of whether what he's done should be allowed. Should one man be allowed to control and monopolize an entire industry of this magnitude? Teddy Roosevelt, whom we get to, oh my dear God, you will love. He's one of my favorite people we talk about all semester. He is such a freaking card. One of the things that he fought against as president was monopolies. And Rockefeller has gotten so big, so powerful, so robust, that even the president can't bring him down. The president can't touch him. He's gotten that gigantic. But when you got the president working against you for 8 years, you got the entire country against you for 8 years, everyone jumping on this anti-Rockefeller bandwagon, well, guess what? The fact of Standard Oil versus the United States, the fact of Rockefeller monopolizing the entire industry, will go all the way to the Supreme Court and become a Supreme Court case. Whatever the Supreme Court decides, Rockefeller has to accept. No ifs, ands, or buts, right? Well, guess what? Supreme Court comes back with their decision, and they rule against him. They force him to break apart his empire and sell off the pieces back to those he took from. Yeah.
Whenever they ruled against him in the Supreme Court case, what was he basically charged with, basically? Why did they rule against him?
Because in a billion-dollar industry such as this magnitude, one man didn't have the right to control and own the entire industry. When this was a literally nationwide, worldwide business. He didn't have the right to put everyone else out of business and control the entire magnitude of his own and gain all the profit. It's something that he was forced to split up, basically to share the wealth and let other people have oil refinery businesses again and have a piece of the pie. So he was he still got to keep his company. He still got to keep Standard Oil, but the Supreme Court ordered him to break it into pieces. He still controlled 51% of it, but he lost 49%. And those that he shut down, he had to get back to. Those he ruined got their money back. And it just knocked him off that untouchable pedestal he had put himself on. This throne that he was sitting on. Nobody could get to him, nobody could break him, nobody could bring down his empire. Well, they did. And he got knocked off that throne, and it was a long fall to the bottom, right? But he hits rock bottom. And it's like the first time is he's having to break apart his industry. He's having to let other people open oil refineries, and he can't touch them. He's having to share the wealth. He's not making as much money. His empire is being, sliced away from him piece by piece. It's like for the first time in decades, his eyes open. And he starts to realize, he kind of saying, he's been inside this bubble, and the bubble bursts, and reality hits. And he starts to hear, what people think of him. He starts to see what people think of him, and how he's perceived, and this reputation that he's got, and this, this persona that he's incorporated. He's the most hated man in America. They'd rather spit on him and look at him. And he didn't like it. Having to break apart his empire, if he loses everything, he loses complete control of his baby. It wakes him up, in a sense. He doesn't want this to be his legacy. He doesn't want this to be his story. He doesn't want, he's already lost what was most important to him. Sure, he doesn't want to go down. It's also, on top of that, being the most hated man in America. That being his legacy. And he decides to bound and determined to fix it. Don't get me wrong, he's still going to be a billionaire. He's still going to be like Carnegie. He's going to set the path that's going to turn this country in a whole new direction. He's going to be the king of the oil industry. But he's going to finally start to incorporate that Carnegie mentality of, people still, he did, yes, in his mind's eye, he did this all himself. This was his baby, he made himself this, he did this himself. Which he did to a point. But if you don't have people buying your product, you're nothing. It wasn't all him. There were others who had made him what he were. And he needed to give back. He starts, now when this is going to the Supreme Court, Standard Oil, Rockefeller versus the United States, he wants to make himself not look so bad, right? He makes himself want not to be such a bad guy. So this is when he does start to try, I completely control the entire industry in the country. I've stolen it from everyone else, it's all mine. But I've done some good too. Look, I built a university on top of that. Make himself not look so bad, right? There's a little good to him. It's not enough Supreme Court didn't care. But on the flip side, he enjoyed this. He liked this. This made him feel good to give back. And then after the Supreme Court rules against him, he says, you know what, this isn't, if I'm going to fix my legacy, if I'm going to fix my reputation, if I'm going to fix the wrongs that I've done, this is the way to do it. And for the rest of his life, he will give back. He too will put hundreds of millions, and by the time he passes away in 1937, he's put hundreds of millions of dollars back into this country. He's built universities. He's built church. He is religious. He was a Quaker himself, but again, the Quaker faith is kind of dying out as the 1900s get rolling. The Baptist church is becoming the big predominant faith. He built, since it's so popular, most people belong to the Baptist faith in our country in that day and age. He builds Baptist churches across the country. He builds medical research centers across the country. He creates boards, which this was a very, very controversial topic in the 1910s. He promotes an education board which encouraged everybody, regardless of who you were, where you're from, should receive education. What you believed should receive an education, right? Women didn't start going to colleges until the 1920s. There was no women's colleges till the 1920s. Well, I take that back. There were, but they taught teaching they taught cooking and sewing and cooking. Colleges like what men went to, women were not allowed to go until the 1920s. He's promoting it 10 years before that, saying, it doesn't matter if you're a man or woman, you should receive the same education. Immigrants, African Americans, you think they get a college education in this country? He says, doesn't matter where you're from, they should receive an education. A lot of colleges are religious, Baptist, Methodist, Catholic. Doesn't matter. You can be agnostic for all he cares. You should still receive an education. So he hits the hard-pressing issues, and he gives back. And long story short, by the time he passes away, he's one of the most beloved figures also in this country. Now, his children and grandchildren in the last 100 years have kind of done this to the Rockefeller name every now and then, but he's the one that set the precedent. He's the one that put the Rockefeller name on the map. And he is one of the big three, the last of the big three, well, I shouldn't say last, story we're talking about per se, who launched this country into a whole new world of possibility with all these smaller ones to follow, right? Let's go through a few more slides. We're not too bad. Tiny bit behind, but not bad. But, so again, invention is part of the story. Coming up with your idea, coming up with your business. Production is the third of the story. You have a concept, idea, and a concept and idea of business, but if you don't have people to make your product, you're sunk, right? So production is the third of the story. Invention, production. How about consumption? Getting people to buy your product. Guys, in 1865, there was $50 million a year being spent on advertising across this country. By 1900, that'll be $500 million spent on advertising across this country. There's so many new businesses and there's so many new products being invented, but also how do I get people and massive amounts of people to buy my product? How do I make my product a success? It all boils down to advertising. This is such a fun time. I've got some pictures. We'll end with a couple of just a few more slides. Not many. So, advertising will consume, the market and culture. Now, in 1865, A soap ad would look something like this. And I'm sure you just all went, oh, right? That is not appeasing to the eye. We don't like it, right? That's not something that pulls you in and you would prefer to, prefer to look at. What's wrong with it? Why don't you like it? Yeah, there's no pictures, right? There's no color. There's no pictures. What else?
It's a jumble of different fonts and text sizes.
Yeah, fonts. And what about the word count? I mean, this is blown up, right? Oh my God, can you imagine trying to mull through that in the day and age? Most likely, if you're, the Sunday paper comes and the coupons come and you see this and you're like, oh my God, next, right? We figure that out. We figure out this is not appealing to the eye. This does not bring people in. This does not make people want to buy your product. Colors, pictures, less text do. So, you see advertisements for soap go from that to that. Of the two, you hit the soap aisle, and most likely you're going to be more inclined to buy Babbitt soap than the other one, right? Less words, pictures, color. If they figure out this is what draws us in, this is what actually makes us, like and appeal to a product. Now this next one, I just thought was brilliant myself. It's a true ad. It's a true blue ad, I swear to God. It's supposed to be the bad advertisement, but I have a feeling most of us in this class would probably buy it anyway. How about some whiskey toothpaste, people? Get your buzz on in the morning and get your oral hygiene on. You can go the more Scotch variety or the more bourbon variety. Just saying. And the buck. You get the toothpaste aisle, who's not buying that? Right?
Rinse with soda instead.
And that's the best part. So after you brush your teeth, rinse out your mouth out with some soda. Get your Dr. Pepper. If you're done the bourbon variety, you get some Coke in there. Rinse your mouth out. Don't use water. Use soda. Right? It brings the flavor of the toothpaste home. It's still black and white. There is a picture, but lots of words, black and white. Well, most of us, even though y'all were probably pretty quiet, we're like, okay. So at this one, anyway, I don't know if anybody knows what glycerin is. It's nasty. But I thought it was, kind of equivalent. But again, this would technically draw you in more, less words, pictures, colors, etc., etc. So this is what people, again, the primitive start in the evolution of advertising will begin with. And then it's going to branch out from there in a whole bunch of fun, different avenues. But we'll pick up with how advertising changed, and then get into the dark part of the subject, the industrial workplace and child labor, when I see y'all Thursday. No, it's not. Which I'll tell you, this is a French ad per se, so it's this is the way apparently they would have worded it, but it's a true ad. I just pulled it out of there because there's less words, pictures, and I thought the boyfriend part was funny. But yes, you caught that. It's actually not. Thanks, sir. You're welcome. Oh, I should stop this.